My guest is Ray Rothrock, CEO of Redseal. Welcome back, Ray.
Thank you, Richard.
Ray, there's so many methods of thinking about security, from defense in depth to circle the wagons to hard and crunchy on the outside. But there's some talk of something called digital resilience. Tell me.
Digital resilience? Well, resilience is a very common word. It's the ability to recover from an impairment. And no doubt companies these days are under attack. We read about them in the newspaper. Those are just the ones that have to report out something. And I think Verizon said there were 80,000 attacks a couple of years ago. So how do you recover from an attack, and what do you do about it? And so being resilient means that you have the ability to keep operating your company, to protect your brand, protect your finances, whatever it is that is at risk through that impairment. So these impairments come in all shapes and sizes. In fact, there's a big notable one. Last summer, July 8th, I think it was, New York Stock Exchange, United Airlines, Wall Street Journal all had an impairment. They were out for 2 hours at the same moment in time. The Twitter feeds were full of, we're under a cyber attack, Pearl Harbor, but it was just a router problem. Somebody had issued an update, and those companies updated on schedule and brought them down. So that kind of impairment can be very costly, particularly if you're an airline and everything goes dark for 2 hours, or if you're a Sony or whatever and you turn things off. So this is a concept that requires, it's no longer a point product or a hard and crunchy asset. You actually have to understand what's going on inside, because these impairments are inside your network. It's not on the outside. It's not like somebody doing a DDoS attack. That's an impairment, but that's not the infrastructure. So we at Redseal have moved with our model. We've always been able to do this. This is the core technology, is to build this mathematical model so that you can determine the resiliency of it. You can identify if you have maybe a highly protected server, but there's a direct access point from the outside world. That server's pretty vulnerable now. If that server went down, what would happen to your network? What are the lateral moves that something could happen? So we allow you to digitally or to surgically and very carefully deal with these incidences while you keep the rest of your business up. The analogy I like to draw is you got a big factory and you're making cars. You have a little fire in the corner. Do you set off the whole sprinklers and shut the whole place down? No. You just deal with the fire where it is. That's what being resilient is all about, and I think that's where the world's moving.
Is there a way to measure and apply a number to your resilience?
Yeah, I think there is. In fact, I think cyber is greatly lacking measurements. So we've introduced this concept of a digital resilience score, and it's based on configuration checks. So we look at your equipment, how's it configured? We've evaluated about 500,000 total devices, so we have a massive library of best practices of how these things should be configured to do certain functions. The second is vulnerabilities. It's not just a vol scan. You can get that from that, but if just as I was saying a while ago, if a host is vulnerable and it has access from the outside world, that's a double whammy, and you're big in trouble. And the third thing, and this is the one that always gets the CISOs really nervous, they start wringing their hands, is because we have a complete mathematical model of your network, we see attempts by routers to go to things that we haven't seen yet. We find this all the time. So if you've got a link to the outside world, well, where does it go and you don't know, guess what? That keeps a CISO up at night. So we measure the incomplete model, we call it. That typically is a pretty big piece of the score. We've modeled it after FICO. So the FICO score here, it's a number based on the FICO score up to 850. If you're at 800, you're great credit risk. If your network's at 800, it's probably pretty healthily built. But we also have the trending here, so you can see this one was getting better, and then suddenly got worse. Something happened. What happened? I don't know, but I'm in charge, so I pick up the phone, call my engineers, and they can investigate. But I think the real power of a measure, whether it's the right measure, and we think there's a whole bunch of things we're going to add to it, but those are the three critical things to evaluate your architecture resilience, is that you can do a comparison.
Right.
So you stand up in front of the board, you get a $50 million budget, you get to deploy it, you hire more people, buy equipment, whatever it is. So how do they know? How do they know you spent the $50 million right? How do you know you're better today than you were yesterday? As a member of public boards and been a VC, right, we were measuring everything. Why don't we measure cyber? It's shocking. I think the world's coming into that zone.
Yeah,
because with however many companies you said, 1,400 companies or whatever, which one do I buy? Which one will give me the better security? If I have no measurements or no basis to make those judgments, how do I make that judgment?
So is there any theoretical thought that's going behind this digital resilience?
Yeah, there is, Richard. in 2015, McKinsey did a massive research project about cybersecurity. They've published a book called Beyond Cybersecurity, and it was published in April. And we found it. One of my executive team members is a former McKinsey guy, and so we found it. We had a conversation with them, and it turns out what they have described in this book is what I have lived through as a VC for 25 years. They have the classic 2x2. And the vertical is how deeply integrated are you in IT, and on the lower part is the impact of the organization. So in the lower left corner is low integration, low impact, and that's where cyber was in the late 90s, early 2000s. Firewalls, antivirus, simple things. It was a cost, a necessary but cost to the corporation. In the last decade or so, it's moved from the lower left to the lower right. And that's at a control point. So we're using firewalls to control, access control. We're using other technologies to prevent you from going to certain parts of the network. Segmentation is an example. But it's all about control. PCI, HIPAA, whatever, control. What McKinsey has discovered by these C-suite and boardroom is that there's now a new zone. It's the upper right. So it's going to get embedded deeper into IT because now the digital infrastructure is the company. And they need to know about this, not as just a control feature, but as a resilience. And they talked about it as the terminology was digital resilience. How do you build your digital infrastructure so it'll withstand a problem, withstand an impairment, and stay in business? It's clever. It came out about the time we were already working on it. We were about to train our sales force with this concept. So we just adopted that terminology. And they like what we're doing. They actually came to our dinner last evening to talk further about it.
Cool. Will you get to the point where you can start advising your customers that, hey, when somebody deploys X technology, their resilience improves by this much, and you start getting return on investment?
Absolutely, yeah. We hope to get there someday. We got to collect a lot of data.
Right.
The other thing in the financial services space, when we've introduced this to a number of the banks, they very much want, well, how's the other bank doing? You know,
Always.
I want to be a 600, not a 500, and let them be the 500. But so there should be some benchmarking. There should also be this ability to compare.
And then how do you get that data for knowing when there are all these connections, either inbound or outbound?
Well, when you run the software, we automatically do this calculation. And so some people have policies where they run the software daily, weekly, bi-weekly, whatever. It's up to the company's policy how often they want to run it. We're actually, having said that, we're moving the technology to a graph database so it will be able to run continuously. So imagine you're a pilot and you're looking at the meter and it's running around 550 or 5, and someone makes a change. You'll instantly see either for the better or for the worse. And let's say you weren't expecting that change and it went worse. You could immediately investigate. Maybe it's a bad guy who's got a hold of one of your routers and started reconfiguring it. You wouldn't know that until you ran the software. So by continuously monitoring the status of the architecture, you'll know whether or not you've got good things going on or bad things going on.
Any anecdotal evidence of early adapters taking advantage of this?
I'm sure there are. We've only had it out there a few months. The post office actually is the first measure we got back from. We have one of our engineers is there. We have professional services, and he's been. The post office got breached in 2014, so they've been re-architecting their whole network, and we've been helping them with that using our software. And they were, I forget the exact, but it was 800 and something. So we were thrilled. He was thrilled. And it gave him something to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the only instance that I have in hand presently.
The very first time I had a one-on-one at a Gartner conference, as a Gartner analyst, a team had come from South America, and the question was, all we have is AV for, and we know that we stopped X whatever today, but we need other security metrics. What can we do? So it's been a while.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
But its days are coming.
Yep.
You have to. These things are so complicated. The other trend, I was here 2 years ago. The other thing that we've seen dramatically, and I had a dinner last night with a bunch of CISOs, is the users, these corporate users. They'll live on their phones or live on an iPad. They don't even have a desktop computer. So the perimeter is now wherever I'm touching the network.
Right.
If I were to log into Redseal's network VPN right now, I'm just an extension of that perimeter, right?
Sure.
So this complexity thing and these users are driving these CISOs crazy, frankly.
It has been 2 years since we've been talking, and,
Right.
and you took over the reins at Redseal. What other changes have you seen both in the industry and in Redseal's approach to it?
Well, the industry, wow. Where do you start? The breaches continue.
Yep.
So that's a real problem. The insurance industry seems to be struggling. Cyber insurance is an area. We've had a lot of conversations with many people because we have a metric. We have a way to underwrite. So
Right,
if you were to go get health insurance or life insurance, they'll come out and do a health check on you, right?
Right.
So why can't you do that for your network? So that's what we're doing. And we're talking to them about this, and they're starting to catch on that. Two other giant innovations that we did at Redseal. These networks are complex. They could be 10,000 layer 3 devices or layer 2 devices. That's a lot of work. So we've got this thing called assisted modeling, where if you allow us, not always, but if you allow us to crawl the network, we will actually try all your credentials on every device and automatically build it. So instead of it taking 3 or 4 weeks or a month, it might take 3 or 4 days.
Wow.
Which is pretty cool. So you get quick value, fast. And the other thing is incident response. So I don't know how many times I've heard at the show, well, can you show me the lateral movement? If I have a host that gets in trouble, the first thing we do is evaluate that host. We show you exactly where the bad stuff can go. We can do it graphically on the topology map we've shown you, or we actually have an engineer's map that gets IP addresses and names. And, and
Which is predictive.
Very predictive, yeah. And you know, it's a terrible term, but we used to call it 4 hops to death. So, you know, how many hops does it take to get to the really important assets?
Right.
We
The active
evaluate that.
directory.
Yeah, you know, the thing that I didn't appreciate, and I've talked now in this 2 years, I've probably been in front of 50 of our customers face to face, is you have a big complex global network and you've got network address translation. There's not a human being on the planet that can sort that out.
Right.
Well, we sort it out for you just with click, complete detailed path. We give you every translation, everything going on.
Cool.
It's pretty, it is cool.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
So with that you have the tools if you wanted to upgrade to IPv6, you'd already
Totally.
know what your space will look
It's
like.
in our roadmap, in
Right.
fact. Yeah, the government's demanding it.
Yeah. As would Japan.
Yeah.
So, okay, that was the last 2 years. What's
What's
the
the next
future?
2 years?
Yeah.
Well, we are finally in a position, we've exceeded plan for the last 3 quarters. Very nice, great thing to say to your board after a company that stumbled a bit.
Yep.
We're doing geographic expansion. We've launched an effort in Japan. We've got 3 guys in the UK. We've got customers in Saudi, Singapore, Australia. So we're building out a geographic expansion, and the new management team has got a lot of experience with that. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. On the product front, as I said, we're moving from a relational database system to a graph database system, which should open up a lot of other capabilities where you can actually look at just a piece of the network. I got a critical piece. I just want to look at that in real time, let the rest of it kind of run every week. But I'm going to check this. So we'll be able to divide and conquer, if you will, the network on a much more clever basis. And then I think there are some other scoring that we need to do, not just the infrastructure, but we can actually enhance the vulnerability scans. I mean, for example, I'm running live. Somebody stands up a new server somewhere. I should be able to just push a button in Redseal and get a vulnerability score, import it into the model, and get a new digital resilience check. So a lot of real-time capability. And sort of the final thing is probably, we should have done it years ago, but we're just not at a point where we're doing multi-tenancy. So we have several customers, large customers, who are running other people's networks. They want one SOC. They want to be able to say, I want to look at company A's network or company B's network, or something changes over here, bring that back to my console, make a judgment, or whatever it is. So multi-tenancy.
That'll open up the MSSP channel for you.
Totally, yeah.
And
Japan.
create new MSSPs.
Yeah, exactly. The ability to do that. So the big, Comcast and Verizon and Japan, the MSPs are huge. And so,
Very
that's
good.
what we're doing.
All right, it sounds like an exciting couple of years ahead of you.
It is, ahead of us and behind us, actually. But it feels good. We're definitely at the right place at the right time, and with interviews like yours about resiliency and measurement, I think it'll help the case.
I think so.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ray.
You bet. Thank you.